little washed out, but live.
A little washed out, but live. All right. Well, hello, all you good folks that are out in internet land. Welcome to the First Degree Study Group, coming to you from somewhere in Antarctica, because it's frozen where I am right now. But anyway, hope all of you out there are warm. But, as I said, we are right now in the First Degree Study Group. And this week we will be covering the goddess, or rather the god for Lesson 1, which happens to be the Triple Goddess. And we'll be going over Lesson 2. We'll also be going over the Glossary for Lesson 2. So, why don't we just jump right into it, as it's only me here. Let's go.
Everybody says hi, Alfred.
Hi, everybody. But anyway, I'll just read the first introductory section. We are looking at the Triple Goddess. As you have learned, Wiccans revere deity in many forms, the principal form being the goddess. The goddess represents the feminine, nurturing side of deity, intuitive, creative, magical. She is the inner nature of deity, the origin of the external universe. Thus, the goddess is the creator, the source. The god emerges from her when she sets the universe into motion. The god is the goddess's divine child, formed from her inner nature, her other self. As the Evangelo de Estrella, or the Arabian, puts it, the god is also the divine consort whose union with the goddess describes existence as we know it. In this sense, the goddess and the god are the polar forces, also termed the yin and yang. Yin is the feminine, spiritual, and emotive aspect of deity, that is that which is within all things and whose presence gives all things life. Yang is the masculine, physical, and volatile aspect of deity that manifests in motion and action and whose permutations build up the outer form of things. In Wicca, the goddess is primarily revered through her form as the Triple Goddess. As the god is often represented by the sun, the goddess is often represented by the moon. The moon's three phases are taken as instructive as the nature of her being. The waxing moon represents creation and inspiration, embodied in the maiden goddess. The full moon represents fruition and sustenance, embodied in the mother goddess. And the waning moon represents fulfillment and endings, embodied in the crone goddess. So the primary symbol of the goddess, or the Triple Goddess, is that of the moon, being waxing, full, and waning, maiden, mother, and crone. Also that of the cycle of womanhood. Every woman starts out as the young girl, the maiden, hopefully free and having fun and very, very spirited, and then to the mother, the nurturing soul, the matriarch of the family, the nurturer, the giver, all of that. Then we have the crone, that is the old woman, the wise old woman, goddess of magic. And there are several examples as to which they are. Maiden would be that of the goddess Persephone, for an example, the very young goddess. And then into the mother, be that of Diana, who was the goddess of the harvest and of fertility, I believe. So the being nurturing and mother of Persephone. And the crone is very popularized as Hecate, being the queen of the witches, the lady of the crossroads, the all-knowing goddess of wisdom and of death and of magic. So, let us go into the separate parts again. The maiden is the young goddess of spring and new beginnings. She is the goddess of the dawn, of youth and fresh potential. The maiden is the goddess of art and creativity and self-expression, of beauty, intelligence, and skill. The maiden is manifest in action and self-confidence, exploration, and discovery. So the maiden is always very, very free-spirited, very curious, going out to learn about the world. Another example, I believe, would be Freya, the very powerful young goddess. Then into the mother. The mother is the goddess in her aspect as sustainer of the universe. She is the goddess of motherhood, of nurturing and providence. The universe is her child, and she loves and cares for it, providing it with inexhaustible resources from within herself, even as a mother nurses her infant from the lactations of her own body. Infinitely loving and compassionate, The mother goddess is a never-ending source of bounty for those who are open to her gifts. Now Diana, being a Greek goddess that can be equated to the mother goddess, being her daughter Persephone, who goes into the underworld with Hades during the dark half of the year, the winter months. During that time, Diana goes into a period of what we could equate it to a depression. So therefore all things die in the fall and then is blanketed with snow. But as Persephone returns to the realm with her mother Diana, everything is renewed and gives new life and vitality, and the harvest can begin again. So you can see that the mother goddess is very motherly, very nurturing, very caring. Her love for her child Persephone, who's also the maiden goddess, dictates the weather. So, very powerful thing. And finally we have the crone, who represents the goddess in her aspect as elder. The crone is the wise woman, the witch, the matriarch. The crone is the goddess of death, magic, and the spirit realm. She is also the goddess of wisdom, visions, and guidance. Hers is the height of spiritual power, for she is the great sorceress who creates her will through magic. Goddess of transformation, the crone is the destroyer who dissolves outmoded forms, allowing new growth to occur. Now in the example of Hecate being mother of the crossroads, or lady of the crossroads, she stands in the crossroads, able to see in every direction, so therefore she knows all outcomes, knows all things, a goddess of wisdom, a goddess of magic. Every skill of divination is known by Hecate because she's able to know the past, present, and future all at once. Even the great King Zeus will go to Hecate for counsel, as she knows more than even him. But she is elder. She is the crone goddess is where we get the Halloween witch from. So she is mostly looked upon as an older being, although not necessarily, because the Greeks did indeed believe that the gods were ageless. But that aside, the crone goddess is looked upon as a crone, as an old woman, a wise old woman, Hecate, queen of the witches, as a for instance. So that pretty much covers the triple goddess in her three forms of maiden, mother, and crone, and I will like to extend anything out into the chat room site now. If there are any questions or comments, anything out there. Alright. So if we're good, we shall move on to the glossary for lesson 2, which would be the words we covered. We first have allegory. And allegory is the supreme achievement of pagan religion. It is the art of using easily understandable symbols to describe difficult or abstract concepts. In this way, for example, we describe the interactions of spirit and body, a complex and intangible concept as the dance of goddess and god, a concrete and easily understood image from which the higher concept can be extracted. It is allegory that allows us to speak of energy as light. And it is allegory that allows us to speak of the universe as a divine web connecting all things. Allegory allows us to free ourselves from literality and opens the door to abstract thinking. Allegory. So, the great series of myths we have out there in existence. The myth of the god and the goddess, the myth of the creation, the myth of Persephone going down to Hades is all allegory. Symbolic for how we came to be and how the seasons are. There are many other allegories. Every piece of myth out there can be considered allegory. How many times can you use allegory in a paragraph? Anyway, overusage of word. But continue, we have the Irradian. The second word, Irradian. Italian Wicca tradition as exemplified in the Vangelo della Strega. Irradian is also a form of the old Italian witchcraft religion, and equated that with Stregoria. Born old. People who are born old with the veil very thin between the conscious self and the powers of the soul, and who can thus access the higher self easily with minimal or no instruction, are said to have been born old. Those who can do that are born old. Talents that others must work to develop come to them easily, seemingly without effort. This is because such souls have already put out great efforts to develop these skills in previous lives, and they bring them through to the present. So if anyone has ever referred to you as being an old soul, you are an old soul, you are born old. You come across as being very humble, very able to connect to the higher self, to connect to the spirit realm, to connect easily with people in acts of divination, for instance. If it all comes easily to you, you are born old or have an old soul. On to chakra. Chakras are the energy center of the body, where body and spirit most strongly connect. There are thousands of chakras in every part of the body, and these are connected to each other by meridians or energy pathways. This is the basis of such systems of medicine as acupuncture, shiatsu, and something called moxidermy, which treat physical illnesses by applying stimulation to the chakral points. In general practice, however, most people work only with the 7 major chakras, which correspond to the 7 spheres of existence and the 7 bodies. These are the root chakra at the prostate in the males and the paraurethral gland in females, which corresponds to the physical plane. The second chakra, or the sacral chakra, at the testicles in males and the ovaries in the females, which corresponds to the emotional plane. The solar plexus chakra roughly at the navel, which corresponds to the mental plane. The heart chakra at the heart, which corresponds to the astral plane. The throat chakra at the throat, which corresponds to the solar, the soul or egoic plane, the soul. The third eye at the level of the pineal gland, about right there, which corresponds to the monadic plane. And the crown chakra at or above the top of the head, which corresponds to the divine, or the goddess. So chakras are centers of energy within the body. Other chakras include those that exist in the center of our palms, which we have used in the exercises in Lesson 1. Just areas with which to interact with energy. Chaos. Primordial, which is the next word, chaos. Primordial deity, god, goddess, before creation. The original state that contains within itself the beginnings of all that is given form in the physical world, but in a dreamlike and undifferentiated state. Both female and male, spiritual and physical, dark and light, all bound up together. Chaos is also called unity or union, among many other names. Chaos is both the starting point and the ending point of creation. It is the wholeness of deity from which we come and to which ultimately we shall all return, enriched by our physical experiences. Chaos is also thought of as deity at rest between the creation and destruction of successive universes, or at the center of multiple universes. So chaos is the time before deity separated into the god and the goddess. It is a being that is both feminine and masculine. Move on to the crone. The goddess in her aged form. The crone, represented by the waning moon, rules over wisdom, understanding, magic, and learning, amongst other things. People who do not possess wisdom often fear it, and thus the crone goddess is often feared as well, etc. Because we covered her a little earlier, I think we know what the crone is. Cybele. Cybele was the Phrygian form of the Great Mother, who was adopted by the Romans as the mother of the gods. Cybele was worshipped by transsexual priests and priestesses who castrated themselves, priests who became priestesses who castrated themselves and afterward lived as women, somewhat to the horror of the conservative Romans. The myth of Cybele is very ancient. It has roots in the earliest times. It was taught that Cybele was the first being to exist in the universe. She was all alone and possessed the characteristics of both sexes. That is, she was both male and female at the same time. When she grew tired of being alone and desired a companion, she castrated her male parts and flung them to the earth. Whereupon they became the god. Whereupon the male parts became the god Attis, her son, brother, and consort. It will readily be seen that this myth is cognate to that of the Vangelo della Strega, with Cybele being the goddess who creates the god out of herself. Now, wait a moment as we get set up for a couple of guests.
Hi.
How you doing?
Come on, bro.
So, we have been covering the aspect of the goddess and just going over the glossary for the chapter. So I'll just continue on the glossary now. Our next word is that of destiny. And destiny refers ultimately to the lessons afforded one in life. The chances for growth and advancement that will be... There's a question out there.
You say chaos is both feminine and masculine. So, question, is it ambigender or is it genderless?
Well,
Greengate.
Well, wonderful question, Greengate. Could be... It actually depends upon who you're talking to. I tend to look upon chaos as being ambigender or ambiguous. Being both male and female, both light and dark, both god and goddess, same thing. But before the difference between spirit and chaos is that chaos came before the separation of god and goddess into the two parts. But there are others out there that say that it was a particular being. The ancient Romans would, of course, touch upon Cybele, who was both at one time male and female, obviously. In some cases you would consider Cybele to be an hermaphroditic deity of some sort. However, yes?
In some cultures, chaos is seen as a feminine trait, whereas order is considered masculine, and in that way it's a duality. Can it be considered something like the moon that can be considered masculine or feminine?
Yes.
Because in some cultures the moon is masculine, in some cultures it's feminine.
Yeah, yes. In Native American cultures, I believe, the moon is masculine, and the sun is feminine.
Yeah, because I've always seen chaos as a very feminine form.
Yes, yes. That is a valid point of view, but for the intents and purposes of the Corellian tradition, chaos was the being before the separation of god and goddess. So it is either both genders at once or genderless. However, that is not to say that having the view that chaos is feminine is invalid, because that is extremely valid. I mean, we touched upon the Native Americans having the moon being masculine, but there was also the idea of the sun being feminine. But what I wanted to cite particularly was the idea of grandmother spider being feminine and both very chaotic. The spider encouraging fear in many people because they're not sure of their fate. So, a couple of different views. But yeah, all of them valid. For the intents of the Corellian point of view, chaos is either genderless or ambiguous. Both the dualities at once. So, but with destiny, as I was saying, destiny refers ultimately to the lessons afforded one in life, the chances for growth and advancement that will be placed in our path. What we do with these lessons, of course, is our own. They can be positive or negative according to our choices, rather than follow any preset quote-unquote destiny. But the lessons themselves are chosen and agreed on prior to birth to try to stimulate the growth the soul needs and desires. Consequently, it can be said that life gives us opportunities that we cannot avoid or short-circuit because we have asked for them before entering this life. But what the outcome of these opportunities might be is the result of our own choices and actions. So one's destiny is the preset lessons that our higher self has encouraged us to go through in the current life we exist in. So prior to being in the incarnation that you are in right now, your spirit went, I need to learn this, this, and this. So that is the destiny. And it can change. Based upon, well, you always have to learn these lessons, but how you learn them can certainly change. Next word is devotee. A devotee or a devotee, weird pronunciation, devotee sounds much better. A devotee is a person who is attached or devoted to a particular patron deity. Thus, one might be a devotee of Hecate, or a devotee of Isis, or a devotee of Ganesha, or any of the vast number of forms of deity. A friend of mine would be considered a devotee of Anubis, because she always follows the path of Anubis. Another friend of mine would certainly be a devotee of Bast, because he follows very much the feline goddess. So being a devotee is what comes down to what you devote yourself to. If you devote yourself to X, then you're a devotee of X, whatever X may be. Next word is Hecate, and Hecate is the great crone of ancient Greece, patroness of magic and wisdom, and the goddess of the spirit world. Hecate is a goddess of uncertain provenance, being clearly older than and outside the Greek classical pantheon. Some say she is of the Mycenaean origin, the culture that precedes the classical origin. Others say that she is of the Phrygian origin, and some equate her with Hecate, the Egyptian goddess of creative force and magic, with whom Hecate was most certainly identified in Hellenistic times. Hecate was known in medieval times as Dame Hecate, in which form she was considered a patroness of European witchcraft. So Hecate being the great crone goddess, elder goddess, queen of the witches, mother of magic, lady of the crossroads, goddess of death, etc., etc. Our next word is that of Charles Godfrey Leland, and he was a folklorist and author who studied witchcraft extensively at the turn of the last century and published the Evangelo della Strega, which was given to him by an Arabian witch. So now our next word is that of the lower self, which is the part of ourselves which we are easily aware, which exists in the physical, the emotional, and the mental planes. Through meditation and magic, we can access our higher self, which includes the astral creative level of our being, our soul, and the traits that make us a distinct aspect of deity, and our monad, the level at which we are divine but separate, and ultimately the divine level at which is all is one. So the lower self is the physical, emotional, and mental, where you are right now, what are your feelings, and what are you thinking. Those are your lower self. Now we have Maddalena, and Maddalena Talenti was an Italian witch who worked with Charles Leland, supplying him with much information in which he represented to be traditional Italian witchcraft, or stregoria, or irradium. Maddalena met Leland in 1486 Pisces, which is 1886 AD. Most notably, Maddalena supplied Leland with a manuscript written in her own hand that she represented as expressing the foundational myths of Italian witchcraft. So she was arguably one of the first stregorias. Modern stregorias. Now, our next word is music of the spheres. And each of the 7 planes has its own energy vibration, which in turn corresponds to a certain sound, for sound is generated by vibration. The vibration of vocal cords creates speech and song, and the vibration of the drum skin produces the drum beat. So the music of the spheres is the vibration upon which each sphere, well, sounds. Physical, mental, emotional, all the planes have their own bit of music. Might butcher this pronunciation, so bear with me. We have Ophion and Eurynomy, something like that. Eurynomy, yes?
What happens when one is in a coma? Is the lower self silent? And if it is the higher self taking its place? Green Gate.
I would say that the lower self is not silent because you are still able to think whilst in a coma. Science says we are able to dream, and some people equate dreams to that of the astral aspect, which is probably certainly true. No, I would actually say it is true, but being on a scientific function as well, our lower self, we still exist in the physical. Your body's still there. You're not dead yet, and hopefully, if you're in a coma, you won't be dead. But your body still exists, so your lower self still there, for lack of a better answer. That is to say, the higher self could be far more active, which is certainly true, because many people who have come out of comas tend to tell us stories about how they have crossed over, the light that I saw at the other side, what have you. So it's very possible that the astral side of ourselves is more active. Really depends upon who you're talking to. Matter of opinion that the lower self, for me, the lower self is certainly not inactive. It's just not as active because, well, let's face it, you're in a coma, you can't really do too much. So, but again, the astral plane could be, and other planes above that could be more active within ourselves. So, with Ophion and, I'm having trouble pronouncing this word, Ophion and Eurynomy, I believe. And Eurynomy is a very ancient Greek moon goddess. Her name means far wanderer. The creation myth of Ophion and Eurynomy is far older than classical Greek mythology and reveals a very different set of beliefs. Chaos was the first thing to exist. This is the primeval feminine. This is one example of that. The primeval feminine, which resolves within itself the seeds of all things in an unmanifest state. The primordial soup, if you will. The mother of all things. A spark of light arose from chaos, and that spark was Eurynomy, the moon. She arose and danced through the chaos, etc., etc. And the north wind then came into being, and it loved Eurynomy and pursued her, following the steps of her dance of creation. Likewise arose the west wind, which pursued the goddess, and after that the south and the east winds. The four winds followed in the dance of Eurynomy, and then overtook her and surrounded her. The four winds then coalesced, or came together, into the form of Ophion, the cosmic serpent, and became the lover of Eurynomy. So, it will readily be seen that this is the same basic myth found in the Vangelo della Strega, with Eurynomy and Ophion as goddess and god, from whose union arises all creation. So that is just another version of the creation myth. Next word is patron. And a patron deity is the particular goddess or god whom one feels most at home with. Some people have more than one, and it's okay to have more than one, but usually one will predominate. Any deity that you are drawn to can be your patron deity. One's patron deity is also prayed to for guidance, visions, blessings, etc. So, a patron deity could be the specifics that we mentioned, such as Hecate, Diana, Persephone, Anubis, Freya, etc. Any of those are examples of a patron deity, a personal view of the deity. Then we have primeval deity, which is god, goddess, before creation, being both feminine and masculine, both spiritual and physical, resolving all opposites and polarities, and containing within itself all things. Primeval deity is both the origin and the destination of existence, the inner soul of all creation. Primeval deity is most often represented as androgyne, for where we get the word androgynous, or the crone. So primeval deity is both the polarities at once, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, spiritual and physical, all at once, before the separation. And the next word, or phrase, is that of seven planes. And the seven planes, or spheres of existence, are used to describe the different levels of being that spirit or goddess experiences in interaction with matter or God. As is often the case with classifications, these seven levels are not nearly as neat as they are made to sound, but rather they overlap and blend in ways that defy category. These seven planes are sometimes described as a successive fall into progressive densities of matter, with progressively slower vibrations, which we touched upon in the music of the spheres. The seven planes are these: physical, at which we experience physical form and sensation; emotional, at which we experience emotional feelings; mental, at which we experience thought and abstract concepts and understandings; astral, at which we create our existence and its conditions; solar, or egoic, at which we develop these traits that make a unique part of deity; and monadic, the part of us that is divine but is separate from the whole of deity, and divine, or goddess, at which we are one with all existence. So 7 planes of existence. Represented from the bottom, we have physical, emotional, mental, astral, egoic, monadic, spirit. We have the chakras that are corresponding to that would be root, sacral or second, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown. And there are also colors, but for the sake of time I won't go into those now. Next we have universal deity. And the different faces of deity are ways of understanding universal deity. All of the faces of deity in the end reflect the same universal power, as in fact do we humans and all of the rest of creation. That universal power is infinite and beyond our power to know in its totality, so we make understandable images through which we may interface with it. That infinite power is universal deity. The spirit of deity is the spirit of deity that is beyond all names and images. So universal deity is that of the abstract spirit. The universe itself is universal deity. Our next word is the Vangelo della Strega, which is an Arabian Wiccan scripture containing the creation story, the charge of the goddess, and a collection of other myths deriving from Italian witchcraft. It was published by Charles Leland in 1899 AD, or as the Curl Angels put it, 1499 Pisces, under the title Aradia, or The Gospel of the Witches. The book requires serious annotation to be properly understood, but is a cornerstone of Wiccan thought. It is said to be almost expressly allegory and very, very scattered. Evangelo de Strega. However, if you find a good copy of it, it will be concise. Our penultimate word, or second to last, is that of the veil. Most people perceive easily only the so-called lower aspects of their being, the physical self and its sensations, the emotional self and the mental self. The higher aspects of the being, from which we derive such abilities as clairvoyance, etc., is the other half, being that of astral, egoic, monadic, and goddess. Ordinarily, we have no conscious knowledge of them, unless we have been born old, in which case we have worked to develop them in earlier lives. And the separation between these planes, between the lower and the higher self, is that of the veil. This is because in former times an ornamental veil was often used to screen off the sanctuary of a temple from the general temple precincts. Consequently, the idea of a veil hiding something spiritually higher seemed a natural allegory. So where does a veil separate? We have physical, emotional, mental, the veil, astral, and all the rest. So the veil is between the lower and the higher self. And our final word is vibration. And vibration is the movement of energy and is believed to become slower the farther down the 7 planes it proceeds. The slower the vibration, the denser the matter. Thus the physical plane is the home of the densest matter with the slowest vibration, while the divine plane has the least density and the fastest vibration. As energy moves upward from lower vibrations to higher ones, it generates heat. As energy slows from higher to lower vibrations, it produces coldness. You will notice this in energy working. So vibration is really just energy. When it comes down to the lower you are down in the planes of existence, the slower the vibration and the thicker the density of matter. And as you go up through the planes, the vibration gets faster and faster and faster and faster, and the matter gets less dense, gets more light, I suppose, for lack of a better word. But that covers our lesson for today, or rather our section for lesson 2 for today, and that would be the Triple Goddess and the Glossary for Chapter 2, Cosmology. So if you enjoyed our lesson and would like to see more of it, please do indeed like this video, and we will give you more. It's as easy as that. So thank you for joining us within the First Degree Study Group, and until next week, may you all blessed be.